Hello, this is a recording of a poem I finished writing yesterday. Started it on the 29th of September, which is a date that has a significance to some pagans at least. And due to pressures of work and one thing and another, it's taken me a few days to string enough brain cells together to finish it. It's a Welsh metrical poem. I'm going to have to read it off the screen because my printer is not plugged in and I'm so thick when it comes to technology. I don't know how to plug it in anymore. Not much use, I'm afraid. Um, it's in a Welsh metre called Cywyth Losgirnog, which I hope I pronounced at least vaguely correctly. Well, for an Englishman at any rate. Um, I like to write in Welsh metre and Irish metre as well, and including Greek and Roman and various other styles of metre from the ancient world. So this particular poem is inspired by the story of Gwyn ap Nudd, who is a figure in Welsh mythology, a very dominant figure in Welsh mythology. He is described as the king of the Tylwyth Teg, the king of the fairy folk, the people of peace, which is a little bit of what should we say, a polite euphemism. So that you don't have to take the peaceful bit too literally. That's a kind of a nice way of referring to them so as not to annoy them. He's the leader of the wild hunt that rides across the skies, and on stormy nights it's debatable whether he causes the storm or he rides out when there is a storm and takes advantage of them. I suspect the former rather than the latter. And in the wild hunt, amongst other things, with his great pack of hounds who are distinguishable from the dogs of the ordinary mortal world, because not only are they enormous, they're also white furred with red tips to their ears and red tips to their muzzles and their paws and their tail. So you know they're dogs of the fairy people because of that red and white coloration. They hunt down souls that either have escaped from the realm they are meant to be in, or are tormented, so sort of ghostly souls that are trapped in this world, haunting the living and plaguing them, and they sort of come to take them back to the world where they ought to be. There are also some stories which suggest that the pack of hounds led by Gwyn ap Nudd sometimes set out to bring in people who are still living but who are villainous in some way. They've done something wrong, so this is a kind of a divine retribution, a justice that comes down on them. But none of that is actually in the story, so I don't know why I'm telling you that. Sorry, one name that you will hear in the poem is the name of Dormath, who is one particular hound, kind of Gwyn's favourite, I suppose, is his loyalist pet, whose name means the door of death. And it conjures images of a huge yawning maw opening up to swallow the souls of wrongdoers. So you'll hear Dormath's name mentioned, but the other dogs don't really appear in this story. As well as the coloration of the dogs, there are two other colours that feature centrally in a story centred around, it's a Christian recorded story, a monastic story, that appears in the life of St Collen. Now, St Collen's name in Welsh means the little hazel tree, Colne, little hazel tree. He's got an ongoing saga, so there are several things that happen to him over the course of his life, and one of the things is centred on this particular story. So he has been the abbot of a monastery at Glastonbury for some years. When he gets a bit, well, fed up with it, I suppose probably there's too much admin and paperwork and health and safety turning up to tell him how to do things, all that kind of palaver, and he decides to chuck it in. He's had enough of abboting, as it were, and decides to become a hermit and go away from the world. And so he finds an island, in inverted commas, not perhaps in the way we think of islands these days, but Glastonbury at that time in history, when Colne was alive, was a huge floodplain. It was mostly underwater. And the larger hills, or tors, were like islands in the sea, so people went about on flat-bottomed skiffs to sail between patches of dry land. And he finds one which eventually is named as Glastonbury Tor. and he decides that that will be the island he has his hermitage on, and he finds a cave on the hill, and it transpires, long story short, that the hill belongs to Gwyn ap Nudd. It's his residence. And the monk has, or former abbot, whatever you want to call him, has been staying in the cave he's been staying in is actually the kennel that belongs to Dormath. It's the dog's chamber rather than, but the saint doesn't know that when he's in there. And Gwyn summons him to the top of the hill, and he goes and meets with the fairy folk and the court at the top of the hill, which has kind of appeared magically. It is not only where Gwyn keeps his residence, his castle, but there's all of the other fairy people, the people of peace around him, and they're very beautiful and very elegant and everything else. And the account we have left refers several times to the fact that their clothing is quite unusual. That half of it is in red, so the leg, the sleeve, the one side of the tunic is in red, and the other side is in blue. Or at least that's how Lady Charlotte Guest, who is the first person in Victorian, well, first person ever, but she did it in Victorian terms, to have translated those Welsh stories into English. She translated the colour glass as blue, which is certainly the way that colour, that Welsh word for the colour, is understood these days as meaning blue. Although there is a bit of a disputation because glass has its roots and shares an origin with an Irish word, a Gaelic word, which sort of means blue, but it's not blue in the way we think of blue these days. It's more that kind of shifting grey, blue, green colour of the sea, where on a stormy, choppy day it's never quite one colour or another, but it's shifting between them all. And one blog I came across, which was quite an interesting one, also compares it to the colour of a mature forest in sort of late summer, autumn time, where you've got those various shades of green, dark green, and sometimes as the light catches it, it looks more bluish, more greyish. So just as if you were standing on dry land looking out to sea and seeing the waves moving, so you could be standing on a hill looking at a forest below you, and the wind is moving the foliage, and you have that shifting colour that's not wholly one thing or another. It's momentarily green, and then it's momentarily bluish, and then it's greyish, and it's that kind of shifting, turning tide of colour. So although in the poem I'm going to read you eventually when I stop wittering on, it talks about blue in the way that most people these days would think of blue. An alternative reading would be more that kind of sea green, leaf blue-greenish kind of a colour. But anyway, the point of the poem that I'm trying to get to eventually is that during his stay at the fairy court, and he's fed and watered and given a royal welcome, the host, Gwyn ap Nudd, turns around to him and says, a bit like a kind of a riddle really, do you understand why half of everyone's clothing is red and half of everyone's clothing is blue? Do you understand the meaning of the colours? Which was, riddling was a common sort of a thing to do in courts of the day as an entertainment, guess what this is sort of thing, and everyone would have a crack at thinking about it. And the monk replies that the red half is the fires of hell, and the blue half is the coldness of being cast out from God's love and kind of freezing in the nether realms, and promptly lobs a vial of holy water at everyone, and they all disappear in a puff of smoke. And as the tale is recorded by monks, it's kind of his triumph over the naughty fairies and the ancient pagan gods. Needless to say, some of us see the story from a flip side, an alternative side of that, because Gwyn has its root. The name Gwyn has its roots in the ancient British word Vindos, and there is recordings of a god called Vindos and Vindonus and various variations on the theme. The clear-seeing, the far-seeing one, and that's certainly my experience of him. That the fairy figure of medieval law is the understanding at that time of a being who was understood as a god at a much earlier period in history. And so Vindos, the blessed one, the white one, the pale one, which you can take either to be maybe the pallor of his skin, or because he's associated with storms, the flash of lightning, that kind of blinding white light. You can take it in that context, and a dozen others as well. So this poem, which I'm about to read off the screen because I haven't got the printer to print off the paper and read it in front of me, and I certainly don't have the memory to do it verbatim from memory, is an explanation of the red and the blue, which is why the poem is called The Red and the Blue. So, stop wittering, start reciting. A pale tree grows on high tall land, fierce coloured leaves robe branches grand, fairies band beneath leaf dome. Huntsman strides forth from out of the shade, snug in braché of blue-red plaid. Greets monk, strayed to lupine home. To him the tree seems palace vast, the pagan court leaves him aghast. Last guest sits as servants glide, in robes half red, half blue, fair folks sit to feast as neath sun bread broke, sporting cloak red and blue pied. This ill-graced guest, this hazel squat, scorns feast as mere leaves that rot. Riddler's slot seeks monk to teach, yet his answer shows rigid mind, to all but his own grand faith blind. Gwyn's kind watch him start to preach of burning pits and loveless cold. The former abbot makes so bold, have vestments told, Satan shown. Enough! Cries the Wolf Lord of the Tor, fangs bared to hear such canting jaw. Old law must now be made known. Hellfire is not shown by the red, but is the ichor swordsman shed. Countless bled their kin to shield. Smith fires forged their soon reddened blades, guarding hearths from enemy raids. Offerings made, none then kneeled. Corpse rime is not shown by the blue, but cauldron waters fresh as dew. Healers brew to soothe bruised hearts. Kin weavers, kith spinners bind tight. Eat well in winter's dwindling light. Mead songs each night, bardic arts. Two worlds join close as night and day. Blue makes the home, red scythes the hay. One the path that 2 feet walk. Summer and winter 2 realms rule. Yet Gwyn stands a foot in each school. This monk fool denies such talk. From both red and blue Gwyn draws might. He is fire and ice, sun and night. He burns bright, eye of the storm, ancient and forever time's lord, wielder of neath swift lightning sword, on horse sword to the star swarm. The centre of the universe, there he sits, seeing all, his curse and gift, nurse so terrible. Wolf of the woods, heart of the sun, he is wildfire, sets all to run, and he is so wonderful. Thank you.